السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله الذي جعل للعلم أصولا وسهل بها إليه وصولا، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل وسلم على محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. All praise and thanks are due to Allah, the one who made for knowledge foundations and through them facilitated its attainment and preservation. And I bear witness that none has the right to be worshipped except for Allah alone with no partner. And I bear witness that Muhammad is his servant and messenger. May the salawat and salam be upon him, his household, his companions, and those that follow them in righteousness. This is the 6th sitting in understanding an introduction to fiqh. And we had previously stopped at the end of the chapter or the section of ghusl and the start of the fasl fi al-Tayammum. Naam.
Fasl fi al-Tayammum. It is the usage of the turāb, which is known to wipe the face and hands in a known manner. Its conditions are 8. The first, intention. The second, Islam. The third, sanity, akbar. The fourth, discernment, tamyiz. The fifth, istinja or istijmar, prior to it. The sixth, the entrance of time of the thing he's making tayammum for. The seventh, the inability of using water, either through it not being available or by harm being caused when seeking it or using it. The eighth, that it is done with turāb, which is tahür, permissible, not muhtariq, and has a ghubār, dust particles which stay on the hand. Its obligation is 1, which is mentioning Bismillah when a person remembers this. Its furad, essential components are 4. The first, wiping the face. The second, wiping the hands to the wrists. The third, sequence. The fourth, muwālāh, in its proportion in wudu. And these 2 are dropped when doing tayammum for major ritual impurity, hadath, akbar. Its nullifiers, mubțilāt, are 4. The first, a nullifier of what tayammum was made for. The second, the exiting of time. The third, the presence of water which can be used without harm. The fourth, the passing of muwālāh.
The author, may Allah preserve him, began another section in his book, and he entitled it Fasl fi al-Tayammum. And in this section he mentioned 5 main points. Firstly, he began by clarifying the actuality or the essence of what tayammum is, and that is found in his statement that it, i.e. tayammum, is the usage of turāb, which we can translate roughly as sand, the usage of sand, which is known to wipe the face and hands in a known manner. So tayammum differs from its 2 preceding foundations from 3 angles. Tayammum differs from the 2 preceding foundations, i.e. the 2 things which are normally done instead of tayammum. The original state or the original way of being is that the person either does wudu or ghusl. Tayammum is done as a substitute in certain situations. Okay, how does tayammum differ from these 2 foundations, the wudu and the ghusl? From 3 angles. Number 1, that the thing being used in tayammum is turāb. It is not water, which is tahūr and permissible. So in wudu and ghusl, we use water, which is tahūr and permissible, as has previously been discussed with regards to the permissibility and so forth. Number 2, the second way that tayammum differs from wudu and ghusl is that tayammum is connected to 2 limbs, which are the face and the hands, whereas wudu is connected with how many limbs? 4. And ghusl is connected with the whole body. The second way that tayammum differs from wudu and ghusl is that Tayammum is only or deals only with 2 limbs, whereas wudu and ghusl deal with more than that. The third way that tayammum differs is that it occurs in a known manner which is different to the description of ghusl and wudu. Which is different to the description of ghusl and wudu. So remind me, we'll discuss that description at the end of the lesson, inshallah. The second main point out of the 5 main points that he discussed in this section of the book is the area where he clarified the conditions of tayammum. The Arabic word for conditions being shurūt. And he mentioned that they are 8, i.e. there are 8 things that need to be in place for tayammum to be considered valid. Number 1, the intention. Number 2, Islam. Number 3, sanity. Number 4, discernment, i.e. tamyiz, the ability to know right from wrong. And then the 5th one is istinja or istijmar prior to it, i.e. prior to the tayammum. What is the meaning of istinja here? To what? Because if you say usage of water, we can use water for many things. So the usage of water to clean the private part. How do we know that that's the meaning of istinja here and it's not the general meaning? Because it's coupled with istijmar. It comes with istijmar. If we just said istinja, it could include istinja and istijmar. Yes? Okay. I.e. that the person has done this istinja or istijmar before the starting of the tayammum. And the explanation of these has preceded in the previous sittings where we spoke about wudu. So we've explained these conditions previously. Sixthly, the 6th condition for tayammum is the entrance of time for the thing that the person is making tayammum for. The entrance of time for the thing that the person is making tayammum for. So the person does not make tayammum for a salah before the entrance of its time. So for example, a person wants to pray dhuhr and he needs to make tayammum. If dhuhr comes at 12 o'clock, he cannot make tayammum at 11:50. Rather, he would do it at 12 or 1, 12 or 2 or whatever, and then he can pray pray dhuhr. The more correct view is that tayammum does not have to be at the right time of that salah, at the entrance of that salah. i.e. a person can make tayammum before the entrance of the salah. So the entrance of that thing that he is making tayammum for, this 6th condition, note what it means, but then put a note next to it stating that the more correct view is that he does not need to wait for the entrance of time. The 7th condition is the inability of using water. For the tayammum to be correct, the person has to have an inability to use water. And then he explained either through it, i.e. water, not being available, or by being harmed, or by harm being caused, or by harm being caused when seeking the water or using it. When seeking it, for example, the water is in a place where a person cannot reach it. And if he was to try to reach it, he would cause himself harm. Or causing harm when using it is if a person has a cut on his hand or something that the use of water would make it worse. So if there is no water, or it is present but the person is incapable of using it because of harm coming to him in looking for it, or harm coming to him in applying the water on him, on his body, then in that case he or she can make tayammum. And we're going to explain how to make tayammum at the end, inshallah. The eighth condition for the validity of tayammum, for tayammum to be correct, number 8 is that it is done, i.e. tayammum is done with turāb, which we translated roughly as sand or earth, which is tahūr, permissible, not muhtariq, this is a ha, and has ghubār, which stay on the hand, which has ghubār, and has ghubār, which stay on the hand. So how many descriptions are being given of the sand here? 4. So within this part of this, the author's work, we find the characteristics that are needed for the thing that we're going to make tayammum with. And this was alluded to in the definition of tayammum, because he said with turāb, that is well known. So well known, i.e. it fits these 4 descriptions. As a side point here, although we said we're not going to go into differences of opinion, there are some scholars that say that anything which is found on the face of the earth that is from it, anything that is found on the face of the earth that is from it, then you can make tayammum with it. And I know it's best, but that seems to be strong. So here, if we go according to this book, then the turāb that has to be used for tayammum has 4 conditions. The turāb that has to be used for tayammum has 4 conditions. If you have the text, my advice to you is to write it like this. Okay? So when you have this, so for example the 8th, okay, then you just put a number there, 1, 2, 3, 4. Don't write it all out by hand. Yeah, you have a paper, you can use it. So learn to annotate on your paper. You don't have to write the whole book again, because you end up copying words that are already written for you, and you end up missing words that are not written for you. So there are 4 things. Number 1, the author mentions that it is tahūr, that it is purifying, tahūr. So this excludes that it is not najis and it is not tahir. Turāb, that is najis, would be that which has been changed through something najis. So you may find something on the earth, sand, and it has been mixed with something that is najis. You can't use that. Turāb, that is tahir, but not tahūr. So tahūr is pure and it's purifying. Tahir, it is pure, but it's not purifying. Okay, what would it be here? For example, if someone was to make tayammum, and then you'd have that sand left over from what he's made, then that would be tahir, not tahur, according to the scholars of the Hanabila, the Hanbali scholars. So they, Sheikh Saleh mentions that they put turāb as a twin or as a companion to ma. Okay, number 2, that the turāb, the sand, is mubāh, that it is permissible, i.e. you've not taken it without permission and so forth. Number 3, that it is not muhtariq. Muhtariq is that it has not been, fire has not touched it. That fire has not touched it, i.e. to the extent that it has been cooked. Number 4, so that was the 3rd one. Number 4, that it has ghubār, that it has some particles which stay upon the hand. It has some dust that stay on the hand, is connected. That is, when you strike for the tayammum, there is something that remains. And the more correct view is that this doesn't have to be in place. That it has particles that you have there doesn't have to be in place. The author then goes on to mention the third main point out of the 5 main points in this section, wherein he says its obligation, i.e. the obligation that is found in tayammum, with the Arabic being the wajib. And what does it mean, wajib? Obligation. But what does it mean for us in the text? We discussed it in wudu and other than that.
If you do it, then you'll deserve a reward. And if you don't do it,
it is part of the act that has to be done, and if it is not done, it can be dropped due to an excuse. Whereas a fard or the furud, the essential components, they're part of the act and they cannot be left out. Yeah. What about condition? Shart. Okay.
That has to be in place before doing it.
Good. So it is something like a component, but it is before the act. So it's not part of it, but it has to be in place. Yeah. So here he mentions that the obligation for tayammum is 1, and that being that the person mentions the basmalah when he remembers. The 4th main point that the author mentions is, or comes under, the obligations, or the furud, the essential components of tayammum. And he mentions that they are 4. There are essential parts of tayammum that without it, if you miss these, then the scholars would consider that the tayammum would not be correct. And they are 4, according to what the author has mentioned. Number 1, the wiping of the face. Number 2, the wiping of the hands up to the wrists. Number 3, sequence. And what it means here, sequence, what the scholars would mean, those scholars that put this as a condition, they would mean that the person first wipes the face and then the hands. The person first wipes the face and then the hands. So that's what they mean by sequence. But the more correct view is that the tartīb is not an essential component. So if the person was to wipe the face or the hands before the face, it would be fine, or it will still be valid. If the person was to wipe the hands before the face, then it will still be valid. And the 4th fard that they put, the 4th essential component, is muwālāh. And the level of muwālāh is according to the proportion of wudu. Muwālāh, what did we say muwālāh was? In wudu, what did we say muwālāh was?
About not doing one part and then going somewhere else for like 5-10 minutes and coming back to it.
Okay, good. So that the person does the actions in sequence close to each other. Not that he stops, does something else, and then people think that he's doing something else. So it has to be close enough. Not that, for example, if you're making wudu, you don't wash your face and your mouth and nose, then you go have a cup of tea, then you come back and wash your arms, yes? So it has to be in close succession. You may do something short according to the customs. You might show someone where something is that's just upstairs. You say, okay, the toilets are there, for example, but not that you take a long period of time. Yeah. So in tayammum, then the same would apply according to the level of wudu. Then the author said, and these two, i.e., when he says two, these two, i.e., sequence, tartīb, and muwālāh, sequence and tartīb, are dropped when doing tayammum from major ritual impurity. Hadath akbar. They are dropped when a person is doing tayammum for major ritual impurity. Hadath akbar. So normally what would a person do for major ritual impurity? Ghusl. Yeah. So when a person is doing tayammum instead of ghusl, then he doesn't have to do the order and the sequence. He doesn't have to keep that in mind. That's of course if you take the sequence to be a condition. So the difference between tayammum for wudu and tayammum for ghusl is that the furud of tayammum of wudu are 4, whereas the furud for tayammum of ghusl are 2, because the last 2 are dropped, according to what the author has written. Are you with me?
The fourth is the muwālāh.
Yes. So first, wiping the face. Second, wiping the hands to the wrist. Third one, order. Fourth one, muwālāh. If you take that according to what the author said, then for wudu you have to do all 4. For ghusl you do 2. The tayammum is the same, but it's your intention, what you're doing it for. Yeah. Then the author mentioned the fifth and final point, and that is where he spoke about the nullifiers of the tayammum. He said that the mubțilāt of tayammum are 4. There are 4 things that break a tayammum. Number 1, the first thing that he mentioned, a nullifier of what tayammum was made for. So if a person makes tayammum for wudu, then whatever breaks wudu would break his tayammum there. If a person makes tayammum for wudu, then that tayammum would break whenever his wudu would break, whenever something that breaks wudu comes along. But if a person made tayammum for ghusl, then the breakers of ghusl would be what breaks his tayammum, i.e. that tayammum. Number 2, secondly, the exiting of time, i.e. the exiting of time of the salah that he made tayammum for. Remember when we spoke about the conditions, we said that some scholars say you have to make tayammum at the entrance of the salah time. If you take that view, then what those scholars would say is, when that salah time finishes, then your tayammum is finished. For the next salah, you have to do a new one. So for each salah, you'd have to do a new tayammum, yeah, at the entrance of the time. So those scholars would say, if you make tayammum at 12:01 for dhuhr, for example, 12:03, whatever, then when dhuhr time finishes, that tayammum becomes nullified. So then you, at the entrance of Asr, you'd make a new tayammum and pray. Okay?
According to this view, but
For us, then we don't.
you don't need a tayammum for the next salah.
No, you don't have to do it unless you've broken it. If you don't have that condition, then here you wouldn't have to do it unless you've broken it. And there are those scholars that hold that tayammum needs to be done, either the exiting of time breaks it, then they have a couple of exceptions, but we don't need to go into them.
So the more correct view is that you
That
have to.
the more correct view is that the exiting of the time does not break the tayammum. The third thing that breaks the tayammum or nullifies it is the presence of water which can be used without harm. The presence of water that can be used without harm. So if water is found and the person is able to use it without real harm, you're able to attain it, then that person's tayammum will become broken and the use of the water would become obligatory. And then the last thing that the author mentions here is the fourth thing that breaks tayammum is the passing of that which makes it allowed. Mubih lahu. Makes it mubah for him. For example, water was always there. It was found, there was no harm in him reaching the water. He didn't have to go to the well and try to pull it out and he might fall in. There was no harm. It was present. But he had an excuse. The person has an excuse where he doesn't have to use it. Like we said, it might harm his skin and so forth. He's got an infection and he can't use water. Now, if that excuse goes, then now he has to make tayammum. He cannot keep using that tayammum because his excuse for it has gone. Clear? Not clear.
So, mubih is that
Mubih, yeah, the thing that makes it permissible for him. The thing that makes tayammum permissible for him. So we said that it could either be that water is not present or it's difficult, there is a harm for him to get it. Yes, that's one reason. Or it could be that the water is present but he cannot use it because it will cause him harm on his skin or whatever, yes? Now if that injury has gone, it's healed, then that tayammum will become invalid.
Would they have to take wudu straight away?
When you say would he have to, it depends what he has to do.
So
Yeah?
he has tayammum, but he doesn't feel found from water, or he's found water. So he's able to use water now.
So for example, you're asking if a person makes tayammum to come to the masjid to pray dhuhr, and then he comes and he finds there's water and he hasn't got any excuse, does he make wudu before he prays?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And Allah knows best. Okay. Yes.
Would that be the same for the person with the cut? So when he finds out that his cut's like covered.
Same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, those are the same situation. Yes.
The tayammum, the intention is to do tayammum as a replacement for wudu, or a tayammum for praying zuhr, for instance.
Good. Well, this is one of the reasons why the scholars differ. You know, we said about the entrance of time and so forth.
That's what I was told as well.
Yes. So you do tayammum as a purification, inshallah. That seems the more correct view. Yeah. Okay, tayammum, the way that it's done. Okay, you have hands. You hit the earth. You hit the ground, and then you wipe your face. Obviously, if you've got glasses, take glasses off. Or in the description of the Prophet ﷺ, he blew, so there was no harmful things. Like sometimes if you hit the ground, there might be stones or something, depending on the thing. So you hit the ground once, wipe, and then wipe. Did you see it? Did you see it? Okay, do it. Yeah. Okay, Tayyib, let's see if the window gave you a clear representation. Tomorrow you have to go and tell your kids. Yeah? So, inshallah, may Allah bless you with kids and help you to give them their rights. So, we want to be sure. We don't want to just teach them something. It may be like this. Uh-huh.
So you put your palms on the earth, on the ground.
You hit the earth.
Yeah. And then you said that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam
Yeah, if they were stuffed on it.
But then once you quite hit our palms on the ground, we then wipe our face.
Yes.
That's how we wipe our face.
Yes.
And then wipe our hands.
La, I didn't say. See, that's the windows telling you that. I didn't say go like this. Khalas. Like this. That's it. Yes. So Sheikh, when Sheikh Abdul Razak showed us like this, you wipe. Okay. Some scholars they do the thing, the face, then. So what about if a person hits and then wipes his hand and then face? Inshallah is fine. Okay, good. So that face, pay attention. You have to go home and tell your family. Yes? Don't think we got water, alhamdulillah. The people now in Europe, maybe a month ago, they didn't think they would be in the middle of a war. Yeah? Maybe they can't find water sometimes. So they have to know these rules. That time is not easy to I'm going to call the sheikh now. When you in the middle of worrying about even what you're going to eat. So now is the time to learn the deen, isn't it? So that you have knowledge. You go home and you can tell those people that are younger than you. If your people older than you, they ask you, you can tell them. Yes? Inshallah. Okay. Yes.
Can you use a table or a wall to do tayammum?
If you ask a question in a message, don't delete it before we can answer it. Otherwise, I'm not going to memorize the questions. Yes?
Can you use a table or the wall to do tayammum?
Is it part of what the earth? Is that part of the earth?
If it's dusty.
Now it depends. Yes? If it is part of earth, yes. But if you're saying it's just dusty, Allahu Alam, what type of dust is on there? Yeah? So if you read anything that a scholar says, you try to think of what the scholar is talking about. There are some walls, even here, maybe not the walls that we see, but there are some walls that are apart from the earth. Like back home, or even in the countryside, there are some walls that are from stone and so forth. That's different to walls that are just dusty because no one cleaned it. Yeah? So my advice, if you read something the scholar says, then try to make sure you understand what he is talking about, what type of wall. Yeah? Like I remember once the scholar say you can pray on the bed. But the bed he's talking about is not duvet, like the bed that we have, like if you stand on it you fall down. Yeah? It's a bed like a tough bed, like back home it's just soft, tough, you don't move around. Yeah? So whenever we read something from books, or you read something from online, or even you read something that a sheikh has said, then you have to know what the culture, what is that he is mentioning. Yeah? What is he referring to? Okay. Next week, inshaAllah ta'ala. Okay, how do you do tayammum? You hit it. Yes. Yeah. Good. Ahsan. Good. Alhamdulillah. Next week, we're starting at 7 p.m. We're going back to normal time because we don't want to wait until 7:45 and then the class has to be short. So we're going to start 7 inshallah ta'ala, and we're going to go up to gear 2. So be ready inshallah, yeah, because we want to finish before Ramadan bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. With that we stop there. Subhanakallahumma bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.